listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, happy Wednesday evening, folks. It's middle of the week. It's hump day. Welcome to my show. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com, where you can come on over and look at all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio. At the same time, you can watch this broadcast in its video simulcast over on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Come on over, join the other Intrepids that are there in the live chat room going on right now throughout the rest of this show. So welcome tonight. I want to start off by talking about something that yesterday I did a big live stream on my Facebook, talking about some situations and talking about the way we deal with them. And I wanted to take probably the entire first half of this program to talk about something that we all experience, we all encounter, maybe some of us even are to a certain degree, and that is toxicity. Toxic people. Do you know toxic people in your sphere of influence? Do you know people who suck the air out of the room because of their toxicity? When I was back in business and advertising and publishing, we actually had some people come into our company. This is over 20 years ago now. Come into our company to do a seminar on toxic management. And it really exposed a lot of things back then. And so I want us to take a look at toxic people. I saw somebody today make mention of toxic people, and I believe, even though I'm not too thin-skinned about this stuff, it was directed at me because of things that had taken on or that had taken place earlier. And so I wanted to look at toxicity and what it was. Narcissistic toxicity. What is a toxic person? Do you have a toxic person in your life? Draining, unsupportive, difficult people are one of life's greatest challenges. Now, mind you, look at the words I use there. Difficult people, unsupportive people. That doesn't mean people who disagree with your point of view. It means people who don't support anything you say, and that their words are more important than yours, and they're difficult people to be around, and they're one of life's greatest challenges. And I want to talk how you can spot, stop, and deal with toxic people who come into your life. You deserve, we all deserve, to have people in our lives that we enjoy spending our time with, that support us, that we love hanging out with. And so here's the problem that I see with most of this, and it comes down to one word: guilt. Whenever I talk about or encounter or have discussions about toxicity and toxic people, the same categories seem to crop up over and over again. Now I got 3 categories here. Ask yourself these. Friends by history. Are your toxic friends friends by history? Now, this is a person whom you've known forever. Maybe you went to elementary school together, or you were neighbors, you were growing up. Now you feel guilty ending that relationship, and so you stay in that relationship. Friends by proximity. This is a person who comes as a package with someone else in your life. Maybe it's your partner's best friend, or your friend's brother who always tags along, or your best friend's childhood friend. You feel guilty because you don't want to put your person in an awkward situation. Hey, I like you, but I don't really like your friend. Do you have that in your marriage? Hey, honey, your best friend is a dick. I don't like being around him. There are friends by context. And this is a person who you see all the time in a specific area of your life, someone you might work with every day, you encounter every day, someone on your flag football team, someone who lives across the hall from you. You feel guilty brushing them off because you see them all the damn time. So you don't want to necessarily be a dick. So sometimes These relationships are totally casual, but other times they can grow absolutely rotten. And you end up keeping someone in your life who's jealous or who has a totally different set of ethics than you do. And that's when they become toxic. Now, let me say this. Having a different ethic doesn't necessarily mean there is toxicity there. It just might mean that you see things in a different way. Sometimes the toxic people in our life are toxic only because we make them into something toxic for us. So I want to go through a few different types of toxic people, and I've got this down to 7 different types. And you got to watch out for these. Number 1, there's the conversational narcissist. Now, you know what a narcissist is? Here, let's just look up while we're doing this right now. What is the definition of narcissist? We've talked about this before on the show. Narcissistic personality disorder involves a pattern of self-centered, arrogant thinking and behavior, a lack of empathy and consideration for other people, an excessive need for admiration. And others often describe people with NPD as cocky, manipulative, selfish, patronizing, and demanding. So a narcissist is a person who has an excessive interest or admiration of themselves. Narcissists think the world revolves around them. And so here's the first one then of these 7 types of toxic people to watch out for. The conversational narcissist. Have you ever been talking to someone who keeps interrupting you? They don't let you ever finish a sentence? Maybe I should revise that sentence. Have you ever been trying to talk to someone who won't let you get a word in? Conversational narcissists love to talk about themselves or just hear themselves talk. They don't ask you any questions. They don't wait for your responses. They don't even shut up. Now, in a relationship, these people will end up being completely self-centered. Now, a relationship, I mean, that could be a partnership, marriage, it could be a friendship, anything like that. They become completely self-centered and they'll never be attentive to your needs in the relationship. That's the conversational narcissist. Now, I've had people accuse me of being a narcissist because I like to talk. But you know what? I also have a radio show. I have a daily radio show where I have to fill 5 hours a week full of talking. And so I talk a lot. I do a lot of teaching. I do a lot. And sometimes I use self-examples of things. I try to be humble about doing that. But yeah, I talk about myself when I talk about stuff. So I know people have accused me of being a narcissist simply because my face is out there and my voice is out there and I say a lot of shit. So that is not necessarily what a narcissist is. A narcissist is somebody who is self-centered, who won't let you have a word, never asks for your opinion, never respects your opinion, and they're completely self-centered, and they'll never be attentive to what your needs are. And so maybe this is a good time to say, what are your needs with this radio show? Would you like to see more of this or less of that? And so on. Let me know. Write me. The second type, so that first type was the conversational narcissist. The second type of toxic person is the straitjacket. The straitjacket is someone who wants to control everything and everyone around them. They want to be in charge of what you do, what you say, and even what you think. You know the person I'm talking about. They freak out when you disagree with them. They won't stop trying to convince you that they are right and you should do what they say. And in a relationship, this person is going to give you absolutely zero breathing room. And they'll constantly nag you until you are in complete alignment with their thinking and what they want. So be careful of these people. They're going to go after your emotional, your conversational, and your mental freedom until you have nothing left. So the basic advice when you have this kind of person in your life, get out while you can. That a controlling person, the straitjacket person, is a person who is going to try to control everything you do. Now that's a narcissist, and that's a toxic person. They want to control you. They're not open to your input. They're not open to your point of view. Now, I'm going to use a personal example. Many times, my beautiful, lovely wife, Rainey, and I get into spats. And sometimes they're beyond spats. They're fights. And if we could get away with it, we'd be punching each other in the face. That's the way we feel sometimes. It's not all the time, it's sometimes. And the way that we had to get around this, I mentioned this yesterday in my long video on my Facebook page, is that you sometimes have to ask the question, do I want to be right or do I want to be married? Apply that to your friendships. Do I need to be right all the time? Do I need to control everything that's said? Do I need to go, like with Rainey and I, sometimes it's as simple as she might say something to me, did you take the car out this morning for something? And my reaction might be, why do you want to know that? Of course, sometimes I take the car out, sometimes I don't. And so why are you asking? Why do you want to know? Yeah, I took the car out. Why? Well, because I see that you left my thus and so in the wrong place. The keys weren't on the same hook. Or I put the emergency brake on only halfway last night, and I was down at full when I got in there this morning. You know, things like that, and you start dissecting situations in order to be right about something. I do don't get me wrong, Rainey does that to me. I do that to her sometimes too. And then we've got to come back later and go, hey, sorry I was being such a dick. So watch out for the controlling person, the straitjacket person. They're going to try to control everything you are. That is toxic. The third type of toxic person is the emotional moocher. An emotional moocher is also known as a spiritual vampire. They suck the life out of you. They tend to suck the positivity out from you, or they bleed you emotionally dry. These are the people who always have something sad, negative, pessimistic to say. Every time you talk to them, I got to talk about my lost dog from 8 years ago and how it's made a hole in my life. Or I got to talk about my new, this thing, my kidneys. I think I'm starting to poop more because my kidneys are going bad. Or today it's this or that, or it's the pain in my neck, or it's my hip, or it's my heart, or it's whatever. You know the kind of people, they're always sad. They're always negative. There's never anything positive to talk about. They're always pessimistic. Oh, they're Eeyores. Hey, look at the bright sunshine today. Oh, that'll probably go away when the storm rolls in later. You know that kind of person. So in conversations and in relationships, they can never see the positive. And they tend to bring everyone down with them. You know this kind of person. They throw a black blanket over everything you try to do. And if you're with someone and they only have bad things to say whenever you see them, they only criticize, they only gripe and complain and moan and piss, watch out. It might not get any better. Now, when you're in those kinds of relationships with people, there are things you can do to brighten it up. If you're strong enough and you want to tackle that, that's totally up to you. But watch out for the emotional moocher, the spiritual vampire, the one that's going to drain the life out of you. I once heard, there was a comedian, Emo Phillips, years ago, 20 years ago. And he always got on, and his character in his comic routines, his stand-up routines, was, an emo child. Somebody who's always down, always depressed. And he was funny as hell. But he said something to the effect of, why why would I want to get married? He says, because marriage is just that thing where you let another person drain you dry and leave you as a dead, drained corpse for all the rest of your life. Now, that's the kind of person we're talking about. So watch out for the emotional moocher, the one that's going to drain you dry. This can be in relationships of marriage or spousal or partner or friendships or whatever it might be. The fourth kind of toxic person is the drama magnet. Now, we all know these kinds of people. Some toxic people are magnets for drama. Something's always wrong. Always. And of course, once a problem is solved, another one emerges to fill its space. It's like these are people that are not happy unless there is drama going on in their lives and there's something negative going on. And as soon as that problem is taken care of and that toxic situation is gone, they immediately replace it with a new one. And they only want your empathy, your sympathy, your support, but not your advice. They never want to hear advice. There was a person, one of the people who referred to me as a narcissist. I mentioned this person yesterday in my big rant, talking about what a negative person I was. This is the same person that 15 years ago would come to all of my gatherings at my home where I'd give people free tarot readings and stuff like that, and we'd all have a little scotch and cookies, and we'd all have a good time. And every week this person came and wanted a reading, and every week it was the same things. It was things that this person would not listen to. And finally, there was a point where I said, I'm not going to do a reading for you tonight, darling, because it's all the same thing and you're not doing what's being revealed, which was generally things about herself that she needed to fix. And I said, as soon as you fix these things, this problem will go away. And she didn't want to listen to it. And so she was draining in that respect. You offer your help and your solutions, but this person, this drama magnet, never seemed to want to fix anything. Instead, they complain and complain. They gripe, they moan, they cry. And in a relationship, drama magnets are victims. They thrive in a crisis. They're always a victim because it makes them feel important. If someone is a beacon for adversity, watch out. You might one day become part of their drama. So be very careful of that kind of toxic person. Then there's the JJ. JJ. That's the initials for a jealous, judgmental person. This is also a form of toxicity. Now, my friends and I can spot a JJ from a mile away. And I want to show you how to do that as well. Jealous people are incredibly toxic because they have so much self-hate that they can't be happy for anyone else around them. Typically, their jealousy comes out as judgment, criticism, or gossip. And by the way, this person I talked about who I did all the tarot readings for, constantly gossiping about other people. Now, according to them, everyone else is awful, uncool, or lacking in some way. And if someone starts to gossip jealousy about other people, watch out. This might be a toxic person. And you never know what they say behind your back. Sometimes, you ever notice that? You've got friends that will gossip. Hey, I got a contact. You got friends in a group where you contact other people and you got to watch out for this person. And it's in the form of gossip. Did you hear what they did, what they said, how they acted? And yet they don't realize that they're creating toxicity by talking about the toxic person. And so toxicity is a very easy thing to fall into if you're self-focused. You got to get the focus off of self and not worry about that shit as much. So a jealous, judgmental person are people that are incredibly toxic. And it's generally because they have a lot of self-hate. They can't be happy for themselves. They can't be happy for anybody else around them. Now, I've seen people like this, and you've probably experienced people like this as well. They're people who cannot seem to extricate themselves from talking about other people. That's toxicity. When I was in college, and I've heard all different kinds of versions of this, and somebody once told me there was a source for this. It might have been Eleanor Roosevelt. I don't know who, if I'm thinking about the right thing, but there was a phrase he gave me. He says, "Remember, Scotty." Now, I was like 19 years old when he told me this. So this is 40 years ago. He said, "Scotty, small minds talk about people. Average minds talk about events. Great minds talk about ideas." And so that's the way you can also gauge toxicity. Look at yourself and say, do I have some of these toxic things in myself? Oh, crap, I'll bet I'm toxic sometimes. I think I can be toxic sometimes too. You let yourself go. So I have worked very hard in my life, and you can too, to say, look, I need to elevate myself above that fray. I don't need to be part of the gossip. I can be part of not talking about other people, not talking about just events, but talking about ideas and great things and moving on to greatness. I know that's a tall order, but do you do that? Sometimes daily life gets us down. Maybe some of us are temporal toxic people. It's the circumstances that dictate that. And when we find that we're doing it, we find a way to get out of it. That happens to us all. But look for the JJ, the jealous, judgmental person. They're generally very unhappy with themselves. And in all of this, by the way, there's one thing. When I say that, they're dissatisfied with themselves. They hate themselves. These are people who might have, these toxic people and narcissists, these are people who generally have something way back in their past that's killing them. And they don't even know it's part of who they are. And let's wrap up these last two. The fibber, those are the liars. You have to learn to have a human lie detection system built into you. Liars, fibbers, exaggerators, it's exhausting to have a toxic deceiver in your life. And whether they tell little falsehoods or major lies, it's impossible to trust a liar in any kind of a relationship. Dishonesty drains us because we're constantly doubting their words. And if your intuition is ringing alarm bells, then watch out. Get out before you're lied to. And the final one of the 7 is the tank. And we're like almost out of time. A tank crushes everything in its wake. A human tank is always right, doesn't take anyone else's feelings or ideas into account, and constantly puts themselves first. In a relationship, tanks are incredibly arrogant, and they see their personal options as facts. This is because they often think that they're the smartest person in the room. So they see every conversation and every person as a challenge that must be won over. They rarely see others as equals. This can be challenging when trying to form a loving connection with that person. If you feel your ideas are being run over or you're not being respected, get out while you can. And there's ways to deal with these kinds of people. Ask yourself, do you have to constantly save this person from their problems? Are you covering up or hiding for them? Do you dread seeing them? Do you feel drained after being with them? Do you get angry, sad, or depressed when you're around them? They cause you to gossip or be mean. You feel you have to impress them. You're affected by their drama or their problems. They ignore your needs and don't hear no. There's all kinds of things. And we'll pick this up another time and talk about that because I don't want to talk about it in the second half. Sit tight. We're going to be right back, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Sitting Bull and the coming of the ghost dance. Stay tuned. 3/4 of signatures at Crow Creek and Lower Brule agencies, the commissioners absolutely gave up. And without even venturing into Pine Ridge or Rosebud, they returned to Washington, D.C. and recommended that the government ignore the Treaty of 1868 and take the land without consent of the Indians. Why send a peace commission if your old goal is just we're going to take it anyway? And so in 1888, the United States government was not quite ready to abrogate a treaty. But the following year, Congress took the first step towards such an action, and if it became necessary. And what the politicians preferred was to force the Indians into selling a large portion of their reservation out of fear that it would be taken away from them if they refused to sell it. And should this scheme work, the government would not have to break the treaty. So let's scare them into selling their land. So, knowing that the Indians trusted General George Crook, officials in Washington first convinced him that the Sioux would lose everything unless they voluntarily agreed to break up their reservation. Now, I want you to do this voluntarily of your own free will, but if you don't, I'll force you to do it. What kind of ultimatum is that? An ultimatum like that is not voluntary. So, Crook agreed to serve as a chairman of a new commission, and he was authorized to offer the Indians $1.50 per acre instead of the 50 cents offered by the previous commission. They tripled the amount of price for this 9 million acres. And with two earnest politicians, Charles Foster of Ohio and William Warner of Missouri, Crook journeyed to the Great Sioux Reservation in May of 1889. He was determined to obtain the required 3/4 of adult male signatures. Now, 3 Stars Crook left his blue uniform in Chicago, and he prepared to meet his former enemies in rumpled gray flannels. And he deliberately chose the Rosebud Agency for his first council. Since the assassination of Spotted Tail, the Brulés were split into factions, and Crook believed they were unlikely to offer a united front against signing their land away. So he reckoned without Hollow Horn Bear, who insisted that the commissioners call all the chiefs of the 6 agencies together for one council instead of traveling from one to the other. You want to make everything safe here, Hollow Horn Bear said accusingly, and then go on to the other agencies and tell them we've all signed. He knew what their strategy was. So Crook replied that the Great Father had ordered the commissioners to consult with the Indians at all the different agencies. Because it's spring now, and if you all come together at one place, your crops will all suffer. There's the excuse. Now, Hollow Horn Bear refused to cooperate, however, and so did High Hawk. The land you have now surveyed out for us is but a very small piece, High Hawk said, and I expect my children to have children and grandchildren, and to get all over the country, and now you want me to cut off my tool and not make any more children? In essence, he's saying you want to make a eunuch of me by taking everything that I have to bequeath to my children and my grandchildren? So Yellow Hair said, whenever we give you any land, we never take it back. So this time we want to consider well before we give up this land. And the white men in the East are like birds, Crook told them. They are hatching out eggs every year, and there's not room enough in the East, and they must go elsewhere, and they come west, as you've seen them coming for the last several years. And they're still coming, and they're gonna come, and they're gonna overrun all of this country. You can't prevent it. This is what Crook told them. Everything is decided in Washington, D.C. by the majority, and these people come out west and see that the Indians have a big body of land that they're not using, and they say, we want that land. And this is what Crook answered in response to them. I mean, that's really faulty reasoning. And this was part of the 51st U.S. Congress Senate executive documents. And you can look that up if you so desire. So after 9 days of discussion, a majority of the Brulés followed Crook's advice, and they signed. The first signature on the agreement was that of Crow Dog, the assassin of Spotted Tail. And at Pine Ridge in June, the commissioners had to deal with Red Cloud, who demonstrated his power by surrounding the council with several hundred of his mounted warriors. You remember that? On the Pine Ridge Reservation? And although Red Cloud and his loyal lieutenants stood firm, the commissioners managed to secure about half of the Oglala's signatures. Now, to make up the difference, they moved on to the smaller agencies, obtaining signatures at the Lower Brule, the Crow Creek, and the Cheyenne River. And on July 27th, they arrived at Standing Rock. And here the decision would be made. If a majority of the Hunkpapas and Blackfoot Sioux refused to sign, the agreement would fail. So Sitting Bull attended the first councils, but he remained absolutely silent. He didn't say anything. His presence was all that was needed to maintain a solid wall of opposition. The Indians gave close attention, Crook said, but they gave no indication of favor. Their demeanor was rather that of men who had made up their minds and listened from curiosity as to what new arguments were going to be advanced. And so John Grass was the chief spokesman for the Standing Rock Sioux. "When we had plenty of land," he said, "we could give it to you at your own prices, whatever you had in mind to give. But now we've come down to the small portion there is to spare, and you wish to buy the balance. We're not the ones who are offering our lands for sale. We didn't offer this to you. You're asking for it. We're not the ones who are offering our lands. It is the Great Father in Washington that is after us to sell the land. That is the reason that the price that is put on the land here we think is not enough. Therefore, we don't want to sell the land even at that price." And these were his words. These were the words, and it was part, again, of the congressional document. And Sitting Bull and all of his followers now didn't want to sell at any price. You can't have it. It's not for sale. And remember the Black Hills? Black Hills are not for sale. And as White Thunder had told the Dawes Commission 6 years earlier, their land was the dearest thing on earth to them. So after several days of fruitless discussion, and by the way, remember, this isn't just a nebulous piece of, this is the land that the United States forced them in. This is their reservation land. The United States put up borders and said, this is your land in perpetuity. Now they're saying, this is our land. You can't take it. You've already taken everything else. This is what you gave us by treaty. We don't need to give it up. We're not going to. So after several days of absolutely fruitless discussion, Crook realized that he could win no converts in the general councils. So he enlisted Agent James McLaughlin in a concerted effort to convince individual Indians that the government would take their land away if they refused to sell. Sitting Bull remained unyielding. Why should the Indians sell their land in order to save the United States government the embarrassment of breaking a treaty to get it? That was his thinking. Why should we sell it to you so you're not embarrassed when you come and try to take it from us? So Whitehair McLaughlin arranged secret meetings with John Grass. "I talked with him until he agreed that he would speak for its ratification and work for it," McLaughlin said afterwards. "Finally, we fixed up the speech he was to make, receding from his former position gracefully, and thus to bring him the active support of other chiefs and settle the matter." This is what McLaughlin said. So without informing Sitting Bull, McLaughlin arranged for a final meeting with the commissioners on August 3rd. The agent stationed his Indian police in a 4-column formation around the council grounds to prevent any interruptions by Sitting Bull or any of his ardent supporters. Now, John Grass had already delivered the speech, which McLaughlin had helped him write, before Sitting Bull forced his way through the police and entered the council circle. For the first time he spoke, and he said this: "I would like to say something unless you object to my speaking, and if you do, I will not speak. No one told us of the council, and we just got here." Crook glanced at McLaughlin. "Did Sitting Bull know that they were going to hold a council?" he asked. Yes, sir, McLaughlin lied. Yes, sir, everybody knew it. So at this moment, John Grass and the chiefs moved forward to sign the agreement. It was all over. The Great Sioux Reservation was broken into small islands around which would rise the flood of white immigration. So before Sitting Bull could get away from the grounds, a newspaper man asked him how the Indians felt about giving up their lands. "Indians!" Sitting Bull shouted. "There are no Indians left but me." That was his response to this. So in the drying grass moon, that's October, and on the 9th of October in 1890, about a year after the breaking up of the Great Reservation, a Minneconjou from the Cheyenne River Agency came to Standing Rock to visit Sitting Bull. His name was Kicking Bear, and he brought news of the Paiute Messiah, Wovoka, who had founded the religion of the Ghost Dance. Now, Kicking Bear and his brother-in-law, Short Bull, had returned from a long journey beyond the Shining Mountains in search of the Messiah. And hearing of this pilgrimage, Sitting Bull had sent for Kicking Bear in order to learn more about the Ghost Dance. I want to know what this is. What's going on? Kicking Bear told Sitting Bull of how a voice had commanded him to go forth and meet the ghosts of the Indians, who were to return and inhabit the earth. And on the cars of the Iron Horse, he and Short Bull and 9 other Sioux had traveled far toward the place where the sun sets. Traveled until the railroad stopped. There they were met by 2 Indians they had never seen before, but who greeted them as brothers and gave them meat and bread. They supplied the pilgrims with horses, and they rode for 4 suns until they came to a camp of fish-eaters, the Paiutes, near the Pyramid Lake in Nevada. Now the fish-eaters told the visitors that Christ had returned to earth again. Christ must have sent for them to come here. Kicking Bear said it was foreordained. You can see he's telling this to Sitting Bull. He's enthused. He's emphatic, almost ecstatic about this. It was foreordained to see the Messiah. They had to make another journey to the agency at Walker Lake, and so for 2 days, Kicking Bear and his friends waited at Walker Lake with hundreds of other Indians speaking in dozens of different tongues, and these Indians had come from many reservations to see this Messiah, Christ, come again to the Indians. So just before sundown on the 3rd day, the Christ appeared, and the Indians made a big fire to throw light on him. Kicking Bear had always thought that Christ was a white man like the missionaries, but this man looked like an Indian. After a while, he rose and spoke to the waiting crowd. He said this. He said, "I've sent for you, and I'm glad to see you," he said. "I'm going to talk to you after a while about your relatives who are dead and gone. My children, I want you to listen to all I have to say to you. I will teach you how to dance a dance, and I want you to dance it. Get ready for your dance, and when the dance is over, I will talk to you." And then he commenced to dance, and everybody joined in. The Christ singing while they danced. They danced the dance of the ghosts until late at night, when the Messiah told them they had danced enough. And you can find all about what I just said through the U.S. Bureau of Ethnology, their report, the 14th report in 1892 and 1893, the second part. This is all recorded. Now the next morning, Kicking Bear and the others went up close to the Messiah to see if he had the scars of crucifixion, the spear thrust in his side, the holes in his hands and feet. And this is what the missionaries on the reservations had told them about him. There was a scar on his wrist and one on his face, but they could not see his feet because he was wearing moccasins. Throughout the day he talked to them. And in the beginning he said, "God made the earth." And then he sent the Christ to the earth to teach the people. But white men had treated him badly, leaving scars on his body. and so he had gone back to heaven. Now he had returned to earth as an Indian, and he was to renew everything as it used to be and make it better. It's a little scary when you think about that. This is somebody is telling them these things. But people are believing him. And he's promoting a dance. He's not promoting warfare. Now in the next springtime, when the grass was knee-high, the earth would be covered with new soil which would bury all the white men, and the new land would be covered with sweet grass and running water and trees. It was definitely like the land of milk and honey. Great herds of buffalo and wild horses would come back. The Indians who danced the ghost dance would be taken up in the air and suspended there while a wave of new earth was passing. And then they would be set down among the ghosts of their ancestors on the new earth. And only the Indians would live. And after a few days at Walker Lake, Kicking Bear and his friend learned how to dance the ghost dance. And then they mounted their horses to return to the railroad. As they rode along, the Messiah flew above them in the air, they said, teaching them songs for the new dance. And at the railroad he left them, telling them to return to their people and teach what they had learned. And when the next winter was past, he would bring the ghosts of their fathers to meet them in the new resurrection. This is what Kicking Bear was reporting to Sitting Bull. Now, after returning to Dakota, Kicking Bear had started the new dance at Cheyenne River. Short Bull brought it to the Rosebud, and others were introducing it at Pine Ridge Reservation. So Bigfoot's band of Minneconjous, Kicking Bear said, was made up mostly of women who had lost husbands or other male relatives in fights with Long Hair and the Three Stars and Bearcoat, and they danced until they fainted, because they wanted to bring their dead warriors back. This was the ecstatic dance that we've seen for millennia in ancient times. These ecstatic dances that would work them up into trances and into fainting spells. Now, Sitting Bull listened to all the Kicking Bear had to relate about the Messiah and the ghost dance, but he didn't believe it was possible for dead men to return and live again. He's a fairly pragmatic kind of guy, Sitting Bull. But as people had heard of the Messiah and were fearful he would pass them by and let them disappear when the new resurrection came, there was this superstitious fear they had of this. And unless they joined the dancing. So Sitting Bull had no objections to his people dancing the ghost dance. But he had heard that agents at some reservations were bringing soldiers in to stop the ceremonies. He didn't want the soldiers coming to frighten and perhaps shoot their guns at his people. So Kicking Bear replied that if the Indians wore the sacred garments of the Messiah, ghost shirts painted with magic symbols, then no harm would come to them. Not even the bullets of the Blue Goat guns could penetrate a ghost shirt. And with some skepticism, Sitting Bull invited Kicking Bear to remain with his band at Standing Rock and teach them the dance of ghosts. Now remember, Sitting Bull was also the man who, prior to the Battle of the Little Bighorn, had gone for days into a trance and seen his visions. So he had a belief in the spiritual. And this was in the moon of the falling leaves. And across the west on almost every Indian reservation, the ghost dance was spreading like a prairie fire under a high wind. And agitated Indian Bureau inspectors and the Army officers from Dakota, Arizona, from Indian Territory to Nevada were trying to fathom the meaning of the ghost dance. And by early autumn, the official word was, "Stop the ghost dancing." Can't let these people dance. A more pernicious system of religion could not have been offered to a people who stood on the threshold of civilization. This is what Whitehair McLaughlin said. Although he was a practicing Catholic, McLaughlin, like most other agents, failed to recognize the ghost dance as being entirely Christian in origin. They didn't even recognize it. Except for a difference in rituals, its tenets were the same as those of any Christian church. You must not hurt anybody or do harm to anyone. You must not fight. Do right always, the Messiah had commanded. Preaching nonviolence, brotherly love, the doctrine called for no actions by Indians except to dance and to sing. The Messiah would bring the resurrection. But because the Indians were dancing, the agents became alarmed, and they notified the soldiers, and the soldiers began to march. A week after Kicking Bear came to Standing Rock to teach Sitting Bull's people the ghost dance, Whitehair McLaughlin sent a dozen Indian police to remove Sitting Bull from the reservation. And awed by Kicking Bear's aura of holiness, they came to remove Kicking Bear. And awed by his aura of holiness, the policeman referred McLaughlin's orders to Sitting Bull, but the chief refused to take any kind of action against Kicking Bear. And on October 16th, McLaughlin sent a larger force of police, and this time Kicking Bear was escorted off the reservation. The following day, McLaughlin notified the Commissioner of Indian Affairs that the real power behind the pernicious system of religion at Standing Rock was Sitting Bull. And he recommended that the chief be arrested, removed from the reservation, confined to a military prison. You get this? They don't even want to allow the Indians to practice a spiritual ritual. And so the commissioner conferred with the Secretary of War, and they decided that such action would create more trouble than it would prevent. So by mid-November, the ghost dancing was so prevalent on the Sioux reservations that almost all other activities came to a halt. No pupils appeared at the schoolhouses. The trading stores were empty. No work was done on the little farms. At Pine Ridge, the frightened agent telegraphed Washington. He said, quote, "Indians are dancing in the snow and are wild and crazy. We need protection and we need it now. And the leaders should be arrested and confined at some military post until the matter is quieted. And this should be done at once." And this is what they were saying about the Indians dancing the ghost dance. This spiritual act. And this you can find in Red Cloud and the Sioux Problem, written by James C. Olson from Nebraska Press in 1965. Now, Short Bull led his band of believers down White River into the Badlands, and in a few days their numbers swelled to no more than 3,000. And disregarding the wintry weather, they donned their ghost shirts, and they danced from each dawn far into the nights. Short Bull told the dancers not to fear the soldiers if they came to stop the ceremonies. "Their horses will sink into the earth," he said. "The riders will jump from their horses, but they will sink into the earth also." And at Cheyenne River, Bigfoot's band increased to 600, mostly widows. And when the agent tried to interfere, Bigfoot took the dancers off the reservation to a sacred place on Deep Creek. And this is the beginning, and the beginning of the ending, of the ghost dance. We're going to hit this again tomorrow. We'll tell you what happens from here. Thanks for being here tonight, folks. Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow night. Same time, same places. Have a good night.